Well, let's go ahead and get started, and people can join us as they go. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jared Cramer. I have, for the past 15 years, served as the rector of St. John's Episcopal Church in Grand Haven, Michigan, right on the coast. And for the past several years, was treasurer. I was the final treasurer of the Diocese of Western Michigan. So watch out. And I am now the first treasurer of the Diocese of the Great Lakes. And it's my delight to host this budget town hall for you all. This is something new we haven't done before. Oftentimes, as members of the diocese don't wind up seeing a budget until the convention packet comes out, and then you can ask questions at pre-convention, but the budget's already kind of done by then, and you can amend it at convention, but that's kind of arduous parliamentarily. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to try to get a picture of the budget together sooner rather than later, particularly because of the way that the budget will impact apportionment as well with the new apportionment system according to our canons. So our hope is that this is helpful to you all. It gives some information. I really want to stress everything we're giving you is where we are now. Okay, it's not necessarily the end. And the goal of these town halls, the one we had earlier this week and this one, is for you to tell us if you think where we are where we should be, or if you have feedback you'd want the finance committee to consider and Diocesan Council can consider. They will go ahead and finalize the budget for convention at their September meeting. So there is time to change questions related to apportionment, change questions related to budget, given the feedback we hear at this meeting. So let's have a word of prayer, and then we will dive right in. The Lord be with you.
Also with
Let us
you.
pray. Almighty and ever-living God, ruler of all things in heaven and on earth, hear our prayers for this parish family. Strengthen the faithful, arouse the careless, and restore the penitent. Grant us all things necessary for our common life, and bring us all to be of one heart and mind within your church, through Christ our Lord. Amen. I also want to confirm, can you all hear me okay? I've got the air conditioning unit on in my office, but I'm using a fancy microphone, so that often does a good job. Okay, good. So let's go ahead and do my screen share magic here. View slideshow. I am fancy. This is true. And we'll share that there. All right. Can anyone not see that? Wave your hand, jump up and down. All right, we're good to go. So this is our preliminary report on the 2026 apportionment model and budget. I, of course, did not make this all up on my own. Thank goodness there are many people to throw stones at. Or to send cakes to, depending on what you think about what you hear tonight. And so the members of the finance committee are listed there. As you can see, it involves leadership of the diocese, staff in the diocese. It involves as well laity and clergy from both the Legacy Eastern and Legacy Western diocese, who all work together really well on doing this work. This is the goal of what we're going to do today. Just to kind of baseline us a little bit as we think about apportionment and budget, I think that's a helpful process with stuff like this. When we talk about apportionment, I prefer not to talk about apportionment, not to think about it as a bill or a tax. Apportionment is our shared commitment to one another. It's how we pool our resources so that every parish and ministry can hopefully thrive. It's how we live as one body in Christ, ensuring when one part flourishes, we all flourish. The apportionment is the mechanism by which we determine how best to share the resources we hold as a diocesan community to have the best impact upon all of the churches of our diocese. So that's why I try to think about apportionment, and that's the way we try to approach it in our work as well as a finance committee. A budget is at its base, I believe, a tool for mission. It's how we align our resources with our calling to embody the love of Christ with grace, hope, and joy. Every dollar of the budget should be invested to equip leaders, to strengthen our congregations, to extend our witness, and to respond to the needs of our neighbors. So that's the way we try to think about the budget as we go through this work. But I will say as well, if as I'm going, you have questions, or you think I'm saying something that is malarkey, Feel free to use the raise hand feature if you know how to do that. That's an easy way to catch my attention. If you don't know how to do that, you just might have to go like this a whole lot. But if I see a flurry of activity, I'll assume that's you trying to raise your hand, albeit ineffectively, apparently. So that's where we're beginning from. So let's talk about the apportionment. We tried looking at the apportionment from a few different perspectives. Basically, we began because there was no budget when we started this work, so we used the 25 budget as our kind of baseline, assuming that it's generally probably an accurate depiction of how much money we need to run the diocese. So based on the 2025 budget and income and expenses, we needed to receive about $1.5 million in apportionment. The currently legacy system yields about 1.3 million, which is about a $200,000 shortfall for those of you who are good at math. That legacy system is a flat 10% on all parishes in Eastern. In Western, it's a progressive rate with the prior year's apportionment not included in that calculation process. When we first started this work, we really wanted to do a flat rate model. That even way back in the building budgets work, we thought, that'd be kind of a cool idea of doing just a flat rate, take the Eastern approach. The problem was, depending on how we calculate it, whether we leave the prior year apportionment in or don't, it still leaves a shortfall. And in fact, it leaves a pretty big shortfall. And so if we did 10% with the prior apportionment not backed out, we wouldn't have as big of a shortfall, but that would mean all of the parishes in legacy Western Michigan that were at that 10% lowest level are now going to be apportioned more because it's on the full amount of their income, not the apportionment backed out. And that seemed like not where we wanted the extra burden to fall as a committee and as a group. And so in the end, we, as a group, proposed to the council, and council affirmed largely the legacy EDWM model. In theory, not in practice. This is actually different than the legacy model, as you'll see. But a progressive model, because that would get us closer to funding the budget, it would also lessen the burden on our congregations, particularly our smaller congregations. Yes, Rachel.
Forgive my ignorance, but this was a question I had at the budget meeting on Tuesday, and I thought I'll pay even closer attention this time and I'll get it. But can you clarify what you mean by apportionment backed out?
Yes, I can. So, if you now I'm going to violate my own rule and I'm going to talk about apportionment like a tax. So ignore this theologically. This is only for the mathematical question. When you file your taxes and you have your income, the way you get to your adjusted gross income is you deduct certain things from it. One thing you usually will deduct is the tax you paid in the prior year, because that was an income you received. You took it and it evaporated. As many of you know, when you look at the difference between what your gross pay is and what shows up on your check. And so by backing out the prior year portion, the idea is that we take how much you took in as a congregation, but we don't tax you, quote unquote, on the portion that was apportioned. We remove that out, and it's not included in the calculation. Great. Excellent. That was not a practice in Legacy Eastern. It was in Legacy Western. So that was one of the places where we were different. So after going through all of these models, I see something else in the chat too. Let me pull this up here. Thank you. You're welcome. I love it when you stop a whole meeting to go to the chat and it's like just someone saying thank you. Isn't that hilarious? I'm clearly really good at Zoom meetings. So what we decided, as I said, is a progressive model, but we wanted to start the tier at 8%, not 10%. So if a congregation is among the smallest congregations, so they have under $100,000 in income, they would actually pay less than a tithe on that income to the larger diocesan community. And then from there, it would increase by 2% for each additional $100,000 in income, maxing out, I think, at 14%. The result is that larger parishes will contribute a bit more. But by doing that, we can offer some relief to smaller parishes who are barely making it by. It is by larger parishes paying a bit more, that enables us to have more robust diocesan programming as a community to assist and equip all of our congregations, especially our smaller congregations who often struggle to find the resources they need to do the ministry God's calling them to. So let's talk about what the impact of that would look like on our congregations. Under that model, most parishes would see a reduction in their overall apportionment amount of more than 5%. 68% of Legacy Eastern parishes and 70% of Legacy Western parishes would see a decrease in apportionment of more than 5%. So that's a significant amount of relief offered to a significant amount of congregations, which was our goal. Some parishes will see an increase, especially parishes who were previously on a flat system. Because of course, if you move to a tier system and from a flat system, that's going to impact the ones who are at that higher level of those tiers. However, our canons require that no one's apportionment rate, not amount, rate, that's different. No one's apportionment rate can ever increase more than 2%. And so what that does, that puts a brake on the increase for the tier. So those larger parishes in Legacy Eastern don't go up actually to the full amount that the apportionment model will be, because they only go up to that 2% rate break that our canons apply, which kind of ensures no one winds up getting an increase that's too significant or too fast. The result is it'll provide a bit more resources than the legacy system. It'll lighten the burden on smaller parishes. I also want to acknowledge part of the, one more thing, and then I'll get to you, Dana. I also want to acknowledge part of the increases. We did an apportionment freeze in 2025. We just kept everyone at the 2024 level. Of course, the problem with an apportionment freeze is that when you lift the freeze, you see 2 years worth of increase, as opposed to a 1-year increase. So that also plays a role on the increase on some of those parishes that see that because of the freeze we did this year, as to give us space to figure all of this out. Dana had a question.
Yes, I did. Is there money set aside or some thought that some parishes might need to apply for relief from their assessment?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Dana. Our budget every year generally provides about $10,000 of apportionment relief that council can grant is an estimate. And our plan, as we talked about it on finance committee and on council, was to be very, very generous in apportionment relief in these first years. We have pretty good resources as a diocese. We have around $4 million in unrestricted net assets. Not exactly that amount. Some of those get tied up a little differently. I'm working on sussing that out with the auditor right now. But that means that we can afford to kind of help parishes along. And so when parishes get their apportionment, if it seems like a burden they can't cover, they can apply for relief and for an apportionment reduction. And there's a committee that reviews those and then sends a recommendation to council. Those recommendations always include not only a recommendation for the reduction, but also for what are the steps that we can take to help get you there. And what I like about that is that we try to make that a collaborative process, that we as a community, no one imposes an apportionment on us. We as a community and our canons decide what our apportionment will be at diocesan convention. And then once we make that decision as a community, if anyone in our community struggles with that, we have a conversation about what can we do together to help you get to a point where that you can be able to pay the apportionment that we as a community have determined. Does that answer your question, Dana?
It does, but I have a second kind of related question.
Sure.
Which is what level of cash reserves are we carrying into this budget?
We're not carrying any cash reserves into the budget, but we are using cash reserves to cover a deficit in the budget that I'll get to a little bit later. In terms of on the balance sheet, it is around 4 million of unrestricted net assets that we currently have as a diocese.
Okay, not quite the same as cash reserves.
Correct. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm trying to get the specific cash reserve number with our auditor right now, because that's going to impact some other things that we're trying to get done, that I'll tell you about in a little bit here. Excellent questions, Dana, as always. Derek and then Lou.
Yeah, thanks. Something occurred to me actually after the last town hall that I wanted to make sure we were clear on. the report that we read mentioned using the old legacy Western system of having a 3-year average, or the lower if last year was lower. But in our calculation spreadsheet, I realized when we calculated people's apportionment, we only used the 2025 percentage. And so I just want to be clear to everyone, what's the formula that we can expect to use?
Yeah, thank you, Derek, for pointing that out. Yeah, I actually found that out with a member of the diocese who had seen it increase and didn't understand it, and we got into the weeds and discovered that that was an issue in the formula. So our intention is to use the 3-year average or the prior year, whichever is lower. And so we do need to do a recalculation of the numbers that are in this current report. So when this gets to convention, you'll see that answered, and you'll see a more accurate impact, because there are some parishes that did see that their prior year is significantly lower than their average. And so that is the number we will be using. Great question.
Thanks.
Lou, you're muted, my friend. You get the bingo card for the Zoom meeting.
Okay, now you can hear me. If a parish decides that it has funds to pay a higher apportionment, can it do that, or is it going to screw up the system?
Oh, no, yeah, we'll always take more money if you want to.
Can it be paid with the apportionment, or does it need to be made as a separate contribution?
It can be made with the apportionment, or it could be directed to any specific restricted fund within the diocese, whatever the parish would like to do.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also trying to get my wife to go to Florence, Italy for our wedding anniversary this year, so I'm accepting donations for that if anyone's offering. I'm just kidding, of course. Other questions on apportionment related issues? All right, let's charge ahead. As we looked at the budget, we had some strategic priorities we really wanted to focus on. First, we really wanted to have support for small parish vitality and new ministry development. We're really keenly aware that the vast majority of parishes in the Diocese of the Great Lakes don't look like my parish here in Grand Haven. And that means that their reality is different than my reality is. The truth is, of course, as any of you know, if you've looked at Episcopal Church statistics, is that's kind of true for the Episcopal Church as a whole. We tend to think of these kind of big parishes as what the Episcopal Church is, and that's simply not the case. The heartbeat of our church are smaller congregations. And so we really wanted to focus and ensure that the diocese is supporting and equipping those congregations. To get there, to help with that, we need leadership training and congregational development. So there are things in the budget like the College for Congregational Development. There are resources allocated for the Commission on Ministry, all kinds of different ways that we want to equip people. Thriving in ministry is another one. We want to equip and raise up leaders to do the work that God's calling them to do. Justice and outreach is a huge part of why many of us are Episcopalians. And so that's a part of the budget as well, wanting to make sure that we're doing what we can to make a difference in the world around us and around the globe. Also, there's some needs for capital improvements that show up around our diocese. And so we want to be sure we have resources available there for making those improvements when congregations are in need. Youth and camp ministry is a big part of who we are, and it's not just the future of the church, as people often say, it's the reality of the church today. And so we want to invest in that. It's going to be different though. There's some restructuring work happening there. I'm super grateful for the work that EYC and Camp Chikagami have been doing as they continue to find ways to take two totally different ways of doing camp and have conversation and find out how we're going to do camp in the Episcopal Diocese of Great Lakes. Similarly, we're restructuring some of our youth missioners, as you'll see, in order to give more weight into the camp logistic work to free Mackenzie to get back into more diocesan level work. That's a strategic move we're making. And last, one of the other restructuring pieces is campus ministry. Last year, we received kind of a one-off request for $20,000 from MSU. We thought it was important, had it in the budget, gave them the money, and it kept campus ministry at the Canterbury House at MSU going, really, for all intents and purposes. They really needed that money. We did it. You won't see campus ministry in this year's budget. That's not because we don't care about campus ministry, but because we really decided that the best way to fund campus ministry isn't through people just submitting budget requests and then a small committee of 5 or 6 people deciding who gets $20,000. That doesn't seem like the most strategic or equitable way of doing it, particularly when there's a lot of universities in our state and a lot of congregations near universities. So instead, what we're hoping is that as we move into the next year, that we can either fund campus ministries through a campus ministry becoming a companion ministry of the diocese. There's going to be a whole application and process for that includes an expectation for regular funding. That then means the committee is not making arbitrary decisions, but we as a community have formed a companion relationship, and it ensures it's not just about money, but it's about connection. The other way that might work is through what are called social service networking grants, which is a part of the history of Legacy Eastern Michigan, which is that they take a pot of money from their budget. It's not from an endowment. It's not from a restricted fund like a lot of our grants are. This is straight from the budget, where if your congregation is doing something networking for justice, that there's money you can apply for that. And that might, for some campus ministry, be another way to do it. Or the third place would be congregational development grants. That maybe what you're doing with campus ministry is a form of that. So we do want to fund campus ministry. We just don't want to fund it through budget requests submitted to the diocese, absent a real relationship and a clear understanding of how we're going to connect to each other. That's just kind of the bird's eye picture of how we looked at this strategically. So let's just give you some highlights from the budget. It's a long document. We have 600 lines we have to go through to write the budget. And if you actually went into that Excel spreadsheet, you got to see that. It's a lot, not the most fun in the world for most people, but our finance committee found it to be great fun. One of the ways that we did it, I didn't mention this at the last town hall, but you might find interesting, is we actually invited every finance committee member to rank every single line in the budget in terms of how essential is this to our mission as a diocese, using kind of the mission statement work that we've been working with over the past year or so. And then we averaged everyone's ranking, and that gave us a really good ballpark for where people generally were on budget lines. And that kind of helped kickstart our discussion and ensured that every single line we looked at, we asked, how does this relate to the essentiality of our mission as a diocese? So total expenses in the budget are $3.275 million. That means that we were able to decrease expenses 2.24% compared to last year. Very rarely do organizations successfully write budgets with a decrease in expense. We did that because we knew we did not want to present an apportionment model that would be a huge burden on parishes. And a part of getting there is adjusting the model, and a part of getting there is finding ways to trim some expenses out of the budget to lower that overall requirement. We ended something called the Millennium Development Goal funding that we used to do. How many of you are around long enough that you remember the Millennium Development Goals? Right? Some of us, this was a thing like 20 years ago that United Nations did. It was super cool. There's now something called the Sustainable Development Goals. That's great. But the idea was that you contribute 1% of your disposable income to solving these like 9 issues. And it was a really cool idea, like 10, 20 years. But it's kind of gone. But it's kind of lived on in the budget as a setting aside money, but not really for something that's happening right now. We decided there's a lot of ways our budget is already doing the work that was envisioned by those goals. And so we didn't need a separate line to set aside money. We just needed to do what we were doing. We also reduced some areas of ministry, Together West Michigan, for example, which is a regional cooperation that we think is better funded through something like, once again, social service networking grant, becoming a companion ministry. We need these relationships. And this was a real struggle. There's a lot of organizations external to the diocese asking for money from the diocese. And as a finance committee, we felt like this isn't our money to give away. This is your money that your congregations are contributing to our shared life. And so if we're going to give that money to someone external to us as a diocese, we need a better pathway for making those decisions. So that's why we moved to that for the campus ministries and stuff like Together at West Michigan. Church Next is a faith formation program that congregations can sign up for. It has a gigantic library of curriculum you can offer. We funded the offering of that to every parish in the diocese last year. As far as we can tell, barely anyone ever used it. And so we figured it's probably not a good use of our resources to fund something not everyone's really using. Now, that's not to say to be clear that you can't sign up for Church Next if you want to. It's actually not very expensive to get access to their programming if you want to. I know for my parish, we do our own programming. Every now and then we'll go to Church Next, but it's pretty rare. I also want to be super clear that does not apply for the Church Next trainings as they relate to dismantling racism. That's a different part of the budget that's absolutely still funded, and that is one of the key ways we offer dismantling racism training. So this is not the dismantling racism Church Next course. This was a different thing where we let every congregation have access to the full catalog that apparently every congregation didn't need. I see a question from Dana.
Just an observation. I think on page 6, when you say we likewise did not fund Church Next, because I think that needs to be edited to clarify this. You clarified, I'll tell you, I personally took 3 Church Next courses this last year because of the high quality of the materials. But I can do that with or without the diocesan contribution. So I'm fine with that. I just think we need to clarify what the document says. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. That's helpful. And that's something that has been really helpful about the earlier town hall and hopefully this one, is it helps us write the report for convention. So you can imagine writing a report to summarize 600 lines of budget in a way that's entirely understandable to everyone is not actually a really easy thing to do. So yeah, those clarifying points as you're going through this material are super helpful for us to hear, and that'll ensure when this goes to convention as a final budget, we've ensured we've made clear all of the points that people might have questions about. Which I love that when we do that work well, it means when we get to convention, we're not trying to understand the budget, we're joyfully passing a budget we all hopefully understand a little bit better. Let's continue on. We had some increases in the budget as well. We increased the funding for Plainsong Farm, not the full amount they requested once more, because we didn't feel capable of giving them as big of an increase as they wanted, because there's no current companion ministry agreement in place specifying funding levels. We do think what they do is important, so we increased a little bit, but not a lot. We also increased social service networking grants. I mentioned those earlier. Those are next year will be available to everyone in the diocese. All legacy grants were only for legacy congregations in 2025. Starting in 2026, they're available to everyone. And so the idea, of course, is if we used to have 100,000 for that, we should now double that because we have twice as many churches. But once again, those grants aren't funded by an endowment. They're not funded by a designated fund. That is money that we're taking from the diocesan budget. So from apportionments and investment income, we're taking from the budget to give directly to these congregations for the work they're doing, which I love that we do that. But if we did a full $200,000 of those, why they're going to increase the deficit, or we're going to have to cut other areas of ministry, or we're going to have to increase apportionments. And neither of those 3 options to the committee seemed worth giving that much away in those areas. Particularly, that just wasn't where we were. We also eliminated area youth missioners. That's been a part of our diocesan life in Western Michigan for a few years. It was a part of our shared life as we danced together and post-juncture. This was a request from the interim executive officer that he really believed that when it came to utilizing money for youth that's going to impact youth strategically, the amount of money that those youth missioners were in the budget, he believed would be more strategically effective if we could give program support to Camp Chikagami that would enable Mackenzie to have some help for the program stuff, and so that we don't just lose her during camp, which we basically do right now because she has to focus so much on camp stuff. So that was a strategic request he made that Finance Committee agreed with and Council approved in this draft budget. However, that doesn't solve everything. We still have a projected deficit, not as bad of one though. It's $39,000 compared to about $200,000 in 2025. So that's a great decrease of the deficit. And once again, since we have around 4 million of net assets, we figured we could weather a 39,000 deficit this year. We don't always want to have deficit budgets, but anyone who's done nonprofit leadership, particularly at higher levels and larger orgs, knows that sometimes for strategic reasons, a deficit budget's not a bad thing. If you're just constantly siphoning your reserves off until you die, that's less helpful. But that's not what this is. This is a strategic use of cash reserves to enable us to do the work we're called to do in 2025. And like I said, it's much smaller than the last budget. We're also having these town halls. You're in one right now because these are draft preliminary reports, and we're hoping that you can give us feedback to help us make good decisions when we give all of this to convention. The final budget has to go to Diocesan Council by September 8th, which enables them to edit it, approve it, and then send it out with pre-convention information. So you all get a little over a month to look at it and reflect upon it before we actually get to convention in October. In October, you can make amendments to the budget. The canon simply require that any amendments are budget neutral. So if you say, I want to put $20,000 in the budget so that Father Cramer can go to Florence with his wife, that you just got to find $20,000 to pay for it, and it'll happen. I don't know why I keep mentioning that. Maybe I really want to go. That's just something there.
On Tuesday, we were going to heal from our Church of Christ trauma.
Oh, that's right. Or either that, or Rachel and I are going to do a retreat to heal from our trauma from our upbringing in the Churches of Christ. That's another possibility. Maybe we should do that in Florence. I think that might actually be a good idea.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear. That is what I have for you. We've got about 25 minutes left, and so this time is for you to ask questions, offer feedback, whatever would be helpful for you to feel like you feel confident in understanding the budget, and it feels like a document and an approach that you could support. Fred.
There. Thank you. Yeah, I have a question about the youth missioners. Now, I believe that there were 3, right? And so was Mackenzie in favor of that, eliminating? If I heard you correctly, you said their positions were eliminated, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I don't know what conversations Alan had with Mackenzie in advance of making that request. My guess would be that he talked to her about it, and she's here. Oh, look, there she is. Everyone, let's hear it for Mackenzie.
Hi.
Perfect timing.
I'm happy to give some context. I understood that this was a possibility, though but my hope, I was holding out hope that at least one of them would be preserved. So I knew that it was possible that 2 of the 3 would get cut. We used to have 4, and then one of them was cut last year. And I was holding out hope that at least one of them would be preserved. Super grateful for the camp programs manager position. Also want to clarify that it's not just for Camp Chikagami, it's all Episcopal camping in our diocese. So
Right. Yeah, thank you.
that it's not just for Camp Chick. So that position will be super helpful and very useful. And that is my response.
Thanks, Mackenzie. That's helpful. And I also want to say this is one of the tricky things, right? When you're talking about personnel and doing budget work and what position, and when you do wind up eliminating positions or keeping positions or expanding positions, is it in general, I'm just doing a little nonprofit 101 for folks. In general, the job of a governing board of a nonprofit is to create a budget. And then it's the job of the executive director of the nonprofit to allocate staffing to advance the mission according to that budget. And so generally, governing boards don't make decisions about hiring or firing or starting positions or stopping positions. You hire an executive director that you trust to be the person to make those decisions, and then generally you follow what that person recommends. So to use that model in the diocese, Alan is currently our executive director. And so we are giving him a pot of money for personnel, and he has a committee assisting him and advising him, but we're really trusting Alan to decide what he thinks is the best strategic use of that money. And I would say this is an area where if you think that having more youth missioner support is an essentiality, I would encourage you talking to Alan about that, because he would be the one that would need to come back and say, actually, what I'd like to do is X, Y, or Z. That's his role as our interim executive officer. In theory, of course, you can do whatever you want. Like, you can propose a budget amendment to fund 16,000 youth missioners. It would just generally your executive director who winds up making the requests and allocations for staff.
Yeah, okay. It just seems, I'm just surprised that we went from, I guess, 4, then last year 3, now there isn't any. So,
Yeah,
but
I think
I'll talk to Alan, I guess.
Yeah, I think talk to Alan. I'll also, I think part of the reason for that is it's kind of one of these things. If you're going to do it, you have to do it really well, or it's not really going to impact everyone. And so really to have youth missioners that are going to have an impact upon youth ministry across a diocese of 100 parishes, 2 people working very part-time jobs, they simply can't really do that kind of work or have that kind of impact, or even 1 person. So the impact is going to wind up getting really, really localized or really, really limited from a time standpoint. And so that I think that that's a part of the thought as well, would be my guess from Alan's perspective. But that's just me attempting to read Alan's mind. He's on vacation, so you'd have to, like I said, he'd be a good person to talk to about that. Mackenzie.
I would just like to say respectfully that 2 of the people who are getting laid off from their jobs and have been doing their jobs very well for the past few years are in this room.
Yes.
And so it's important for us to acknowledge the work that they've done, and that while it's not always seen on the outside, the important work that they've done as 1/8 time staff people,
Yeah.
their work has been very essential. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's easy to talk about personnel when it's a budget line, but they're humans that are also present here and engaged in our diocese.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mackenzie, for raising that. Yeah, and the 2 people that are here that have been doing that work, they could tell you a lot of the amazing stuff that they do. And so it's challenging. You have to make these decisions about what we can and cannot fund as a diocese and where we're going to allocate those resources strategically and best. And so in deciding sometimes to make a shift in staffing doesn't reflect upon someone not doing a good job. It really was for Alan that we really needed a camp program manager, and absent increasing the apportionment, cutting other ministry, in other areas, this was what he thought would be the most effective way to get us to getting that other position into the piece. Because he knew that we couldn't make staff shifts that weren't budget neutral. They couldn't increase the budget because it would just increase the deficit even further. Other questions or comments or reflections on the budget? Dana. You're muted. You get bingo number 2 for the meeting.
You know, because there's nobody else around, I hadn't turned it off until just a minute ago when I had to cough. Shame on me. So I just want to come back to the issue I raised earlier and just clarify for myself when we anticipate knowing what our cash reserves actually are, and whether or not Diocesan Council or anyone else is planning to codify what it is that we keep in cash and cash equivalents.
Yeah, it's a great question. So my meeting with the auditor and the CFO is scheduled for the beginning of September for us to go through the balance sheet and ensure that we're tying the balance sheet in a way that makes sense and gives us that information really clearly. I'll say 2 other things about those cash reserves is currently we have too much money in cash. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing that council authorized, that I requested, is that we're going to start a daily sweep that we're going to set up. For those who have done some work in corporate world, you may know about this, but when you have significant money in cash, what you do is you set a threshold. When you're over that threshold, they sweep that cash into some kind of interest-bearing account or mechanism. And then when you're below that threshold, they sweep it the other direction. So it's just a simple program you set up. So we're going to set that up for the diocese to ensure that because we have the cash, and the bank is certainly making money off the cash. But we want to be sure that the diocese is getting a portion of that and is being effective with that. So that's number one. Number two is that we're also working right now on a possible grant that would be added to the existing grants we have as a diocese. And these would be taking a portion of those cash reserves, whatever it winds up being when we finally get that number nailed down, and creating strategic grants that congregations can apply for that would make shifts in their future. That could be a congregation that's on the edge of being able to afford full-time clergy. It could be a cluster of congregations that could almost pull off a full-time, but just need a little help to get there. It could be a smaller congregation that could only dream of full-time clergy, but has some amazing justice work or other kind of work they want to do and they want assistance with. So it would be a significant grant number that would then be stepped down over a period of years. Our goal as well, by the time we get to convention, is to have that grant and all of the other grants we have. We have a lot of grants in our diocesan life. Have those all clear, that there's one page you can go to that these are the grants we have as a diocese. These are the applications for how you apply to them. These are the bodies that make those decisions so that we can all have equal access. Because right now it's hard to find them all. And so it means if you know about the grant, you can apply for the grant and get the money. But not everyone knows everything that's available. So that's another thing we're hoping to do with those cash reserves. Because a lot of those cash reserves are from accumulated surpluses over the past 5 years due to the pandemic, due to staffing transition, due to not having a bishop. So the diocese has saved a lot of money over those past 5 years, and we want to be sure we're taking that money and putting it strategically to use in the congregations that we have. Lou, and then Dana again.
Are you entertaining questions about individual line items of the budget, or are you getting that later?
Oh, absolutely. Go for it. That's super exciting. Let me pull mine up.
The amount allocated to the disciplinary board, I think, is a little light.
Okay.
And we are also compensating the Diocese of Michigan for the time that Bishop Perry spends on the on reference panel and disciplinary board work with us. Last year it was 20,000. It's been dropped to 10.
So that was, this is helpful to hear. This is exactly where we have this meeting. I'm trying to remind me what line that's on.
Oh Lord, I just closed it.
That's okay. I'll look for it here. 1 second. I know we've got it in here. Auto for. Let's see. Hold, please.
Did you find it?
I'm just gonna open the actual spreadsheet. Then I can actually run a search on it. 1 second.
What's line 117?
Thank you. 117. There it is. Yes. So as you can see, the blue column is budget request. So we funded what the request was that we received.
From whom?
I think this might be one that maybe there wasn't a request that came in. I don't know. Sarah's the one that puts all of these in. So it could be that a request didn't come in, and so we took our best guess at it. That happened for some areas where people didn't submit budget requests. But if you need a different amount, that's really easy for us to fix.
Okay.
Do you know if you submitted a budget request, Lou?
No, but he asked me if we needed one. That we're supposed to do that.
Yeah, that's probably a shortfall. The budget request forms went out to everyone, should have gone out to everyone with line item authority, and they also went out in a couple of diocesan newsletters inviting people who wanted to submit them too. So what I will do is I will make a note, and I will have Sarah send you a budget request form that you can send in to me. And when we meet our next meeting, we'll update the request line and also update the granted line. Does that work?
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
And this, like I said, this is how we discover if there's holes in our database that we're not catching everyone. So I'll send a note to Sarah right now. Budget request form for Lou. All right. Other questions, comments? Not hearing. Oh, Dana's back.
Well, I lowered my hand while you were listening to Lou. I figured that was
That's good.
more appropriate. I just want to be clear, Jared, that when I say cash reserves, I'm not talking about non-earning cash. I'm talking about liquid assets that we could use in lieu of selling into a bad market or something. That's all.
Yep, that's what I understood you to be saying.
Okay.
Any other questions? Our last town hall ended 15 minutes early as well, so you all are so far par for the course, which is good. But you've got me if you want me. Not seeing any. Well, I will just say thank you. If you are one of those people who came to this meeting and you'd only really glanced at stuff, maybe we have whet your appetite. And so if you decide to go ahead and dig a little deeper in and you notice anything you're curious about, please do let me know. I think one of the most important parts for me of this work of building bridges as we come together as the Diocese of the Great Lakes is a practice I encourage people to do a lot in my church and in nonprofit work is to assume good intent. That we are trying to do what we think we're supposed to be doing. And if you assume good intent, it might be that there's a place that like Lou's, that there was just a budget request form that didn't get to the right spot. And so we can find that out. We can fix that. So as you go through stuff, if you see that wrong, please don't feel awkward or uncomfortable about reaching out. It could have been a mistake, or it could have been something that we thought about it one way, but you've got a perspective that we don't know. And you want us to hear that perspective and to share that with the committee and council and do things differently. That's super important for all of us as a finance committee and as Diocesan Council. In the end, we are one body in Christ. When one part flourishes, we all flourish, and apportionment and budgets are how we try to do that. So what I'm going to do now is go to the chat. I'll try to ask questions in the chat first. If you have a question or comment, if you could try to use the raise hand feature, that will enable me to keep track of you. If you don't know how to use the raise hand feature still at this point in our life with Zoom, then I will give you a hug when I see you at convention and try to show you, and you can just shout at me for now.
You can also call me at a later date, and I will show you how to do that.
She will. So yeah, Heather is acknowledging. Oh yeah, there are now sustainable development goals. That's helpful to know. Yeah, 100,000 would not cover our trauma work either. Those are the comments so far. Very serious comments. That's excellent. Questions?
Can you stop sharing your screen so that we can see faces?
Yes. Share. Nope. Okay. Stop sharing. Stop sharing. There we go. Great. Anyone? Bueller? Yeah, Heather.
So nobody's jumping in. So hi, I'm Heather. I am priest resident in now the Diocese of the Great Lakes. Woohoo! Legacy, Eastern Michigan. I have a couple things I just wanted to mention. One is, so the ministry I do is I am the coordinator of Province 5. If you don't know what Province 5 is, please ask me. I will drop shameless advertising. I will drop my website into the chat and you can track it down there, because if you are sitting in this room, you are part of Province 5, which means you have all sorts of resources that you may not be taking advantage of. So it's okay that we're not networking anymore in the Diocese of the Great Lakes, because that's one of the things that Province 5 can offer. So you may find some ministry that you'd like to do there. So with that, in the thing, I just want to put a note out that you can figure out what your apportionment to Province 5 is going to be. You just have to do 0.3% of the adjusted income from 2 years ago. So we'll be working on the 2026 budget. So look at the adjusted income for 2024. I don't have those numbers yet. When I was asked for those numbers, you're correct. I could not give those to you because it has to go from the diocese to the church, and then I get them from the church and send out a letter. So the official number will come from me, but you can get closer. Your guess is probably super close.
You
So
said 0.3% of
your adjusted income,
2
whatever.
years ago?
2 years ago, 2 years from so 2024. So
I
whatever
will send
number
that to
gets reported
Sarah
to the-
right now. Great, thank you.
And number two, changing hats. So I'm the coordinator of Province 5. I'm also the fundraising chair for Canterbury MSU. And I was very, very, very happy. Thank you so much for giving Canterbury MSU some money last year when we asked. You saved the entire program. You saved the entire ministry, because without your money that came in earlier in the year, we wouldn't have been able to cover our rent and our campus missioner for the beginning of the year. I am sad to see it go away, but I will also throw my hat into the ring when you want to start talking about campus ministry. I care a lot about campus ministry. I am sitting here today because of youth and campus ministry in the world. And by not doing campus ministry, we are hurting ourselves so badly. So anyway, I wish we could have gotten some more for Canterbury MSU. I understand the rationale, but anyway, don't worry, I'll be at convention with my blue and green buckets, and you can throw money at both of the campuses in the state of Michigan. They're doing amazing, wonderful work. There are some more smaller ones, but those are the big two. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Heather, and thank you for raising that, because I wanted to talk about that's another area where the difficulty was not a desire to fund, but a mechanism of funding. And so some of the campus ministry requests that came in seems to me like we should have a companion ministry agreement. Like we should just absolutely, Canterbury MSU should be a companion ministry. That application was just approved at council this year, this month. And so hopefully that'll be coming out soon. We can approve that, make them a companion ministry, determine how we fund that relationship going forward. Because I'm a big believer that, particularly having been on nonprofit boards, and it's helpful to know funding is not a one-time thing. There's a continuing relationship. Some of the campus ministry requests that came in as well seems like they might be really, really good, really well suited for a social service ministry grant. This is a partnership of parishes making locally, and we should do that. The difficulty we had is, a lot of our parishes are around some kind of college or campus ministry. And so how do we determine who gets funding and who does not get funding when it's just a budget request? If there is an application involved, like a companion ministry application or social services grant application, then there's a way of kind of adjudicating what's going on, what the differences might be, and finding ways to fund those, as opposed to just a straight budget request, which is more challenging for us to find, particularly when we're, with the deficit situation. So if we fund it, we are either increasing the deficit or we are increasing apportionments or we're cutting ministry somewhere else. So thank you for raising that. And I am also a result of campus ministry. That's why I'm an Episcopalian, because there was a good campus ministry program at my parish in Abilene, Texas.
Woohoo! So
Sister.
thank you for that. I will, we have a new campus missioner starting at Canterbury MSU that I can't release their name yet, but super soon. So they're starting, and we will be in touch about that. Also, another shameless plug, there is a campus ministry developer who works for Province 5. So if your parish or worshiping community is near an institution of higher learning and you want some resources, Province 5 can help you with that.
Great. Sister Diane?
Well, I'll piggyback on Heather's comments about campus ministry. St. John's submitted a very piddly request for a piddly amount, and I have come to recognize we just need to ask for a whole lot more than that. But it's very difficult to read. It's frustrating to read. We do believe campus ministry is an important part of the future of our church, but so some of this seems to be a question of if we're going to give it a different name, or if we're going to submit something, ask you to give us money out of a different pocket. And I'll just say, to say it's important, but we're not going to fund it, gets old. Sure. And my concern about even the money around indigenous relations, I really hope that our efforts at convention last year were not a one-off. That Zeeboing, its contribution smack dab in the center of our new diocese, can be recognized, but that we can not engage in tokenism about our relationships there. And that's something else that St. John's is really working to develop with Zeeboing and the tribe in general. So I'm just saying, I read through all this, I get it, but we need to put our money where our mouth is, and to say that something is important, but we don't have the money for it right now, or we're not going to use the money for it right now. This past Sunday's gospel, pay attention to the order of what Jesus says. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And to me, that said, it's not put your money there because your heart is on God. It's where you're putting your stuff tells you where your heart is. If you want your heart to be someplace else, you need to think about where you're putting your treasure.
That's helpful, Diane. So I'd be curious as the finance committee looks at making, because of course this is not the final budget. This is just our first draft, and we're going to make changes at our next meeting after feedback here. When the finance committee meets next and they look at the campus ministry question, as someone who's on the ground on this, would you say that it would make more sense to do what we were saying, which is to treat this as maybe this might be a social service networking grant opportunity? Or would you say it makes more sense to go ahead and fund what was requested and just go ahead and increase the deficit? Or would you say we should do a slight increase to apportionment to provide more resources? Or are there ministries within the budget that you think we are not as important as campus ministry that we could maybe spend less on so that we could meet that strategic priority? Because those are kind of the options in front of us. Would any of those be kind of where you would go or encourage us to go as we try to?
Well, since we only got this information not too long ago, it's really difficult for me to come up with that at this point. But I will tell you that there are already conversations in place about presenting a strategic plan for this kind of thing in the diocese. So
if when you look at it, you do have any suggestions or ideas that where you think we could do it, please do feel free to email me later. And
I will let you know.
And that'll be helpful for the committee to know where to do it.
Okay,
Jen?
great. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jed Fox. I'm the new rector at St. Mark's in Grand Rapids. Very, very new, it feels like. And I just had a question about the apportionment part, going back that way a minute. I was wondering if the Finance Committee, when it was looking at apportionment, looked at doing real apportionment calculated in real time rather than in as looking backwards. You know, things are maybe a tiny bit uncertain in the world at the moment. You know, that uncertainty often plays havoc with our budgets. And I was just wondering, particularly as churches deal with all of that uncertainty, if we've thought about maybe calculating our apportionment based on what we're actually taking in the moment rather than on our legacy.
That's helpful, Jed. We did have some conversation about that because we know that there's a reality that sometimes when you look at those 3-year numbers, like there was one small parish that had a pretty significant increase in their apportionment, but when you look at the 3-year numbers, there's massive volatility in what their income has been. And so, yeah, how do you apportionment off of that? And kind of where we landed were two things that we dealt with. One is that to get a hard number absent a parochial report is really hard because we're not quite sure what we're going to ask people for absent a parochial report. So that was step one. And step two would be that the way that it is, and if I didn't say this well early, I apologize. The way that it is structured is that it's your 3-year average or your prior year, whichever is less. And so if your 3-year average is higher because you had a period where you were just rolling in it, you know, maybe people kept stealing your prideful flag polls and you wound up on WZZM a lot and people gave you money, then that's a thing. That's great. But that didn't happen next year, and I couldn't hire Heather to come out and steal a flagpole for me to help me raise money. So what am I going to do? So there is that help in there if your prior year. And then the other would be if the prior year doesn't reflect your current situation, then it would just be a apportionment reduction request. Say, hey, our prior year was this, but we're actually here now. And could we maybe do an apportionment off of that number? And that's the sort of thing we're always really receptive to.
Okay, yeah, I'm just asking because I'm coming from a diocese where we figured we didn't call it apportionment, we call it assessment. But we figured our assessment month to month. So what we took in an income in a month was what we paid in assessment that month. And I was always surprised it was remarkably stable from year to year. But it was
that?
Diocese of Olympia.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know about that. I'll reach out to them and find out. I'd love to hear more about that because that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, the diocese would send us out a spreadsheet at the beginning of the year that would do the calculation for us, and then you just plug in what your net disposable income was that month, and then you'd send them a check by the 14th of the following month.
Wow, cool. Thank you for sharing. That's a great idea. Yeah, I'd be curious to look at that and see if that would help with parishes that are experiencing volatility. That's a great idea. Other questions? There's a lot in the chat. I'm not necessarily watching. Heather. Barbara said after it's approved, the summary report explaining the changes would be helpful. Who can't attend? Definitely. What portion of the net 4 million is cash reserves? That's an excellent question. I'm working on that with the auditor right now. Not all of it, but a significant portion of it is cash reserves. And because of that, we are trying to work on an additional grant program to roll out. Hopefully, we're hoping to get it figured out by convention to use some of those cash reserves and make even more money available for strategic grants in places where churches are wanting to do work and can't. And this might hit Sister Diane again as well as one of the places that might fit perfectly for the great work that she's doing there. So once we get that nailed down, our goal is to have something to present to council next month for a proposal for another grant program. And then the step 2 of that is when we present that grant program at convention, we want to be able to say on one page, here are all of the grants of the Episcopal Diocese of the Great Lakes. Here's where you apply for those grants. Here are the people that oversee those grants and make decisions so that every parish has equal opportunity to access those strategic resources we put together. Because we actually, as a diocese, we do a significant amount of grant funding. And the way it is now is if you know about the grants, you get the grants. And if you don't, you don't. And so we want to make sure we're making all of those really super available to people. To whom should we address questions about apportionment, Bob? Bob, that could be me. You can do that either in this meeting or you can reach me personally at rector@sjegh.com. How is our operating statement doing year to date relative to budget? Really well. We've only done the review of Q1 financials because it took a long time to build the chart of accounts with the new diocese. We've seen a draft of Q2 financials, but I haven't seen a reconciled version of them yet as the treasurer, so I haven't done an analysis of them yet. But we are doing really well. Our asset ratio is good. Our daily cash on hand is good. We're lagging budget a little bit in most expenses, which is good. So yeah, we're doing really good in that area. Mackenzie wants to connect with someone. Find Mackenzie. Jeez, see how that is. Nuria has given me information. Oh, perfect. About Olympia. I'll go ahead and save that, Nuria. Thanks for
That's
finding.
Actually, it's not exactly what Jed mentioned, but it's something I stumbled across while looking for what Jed mentioned. And there's something else I will send you separately.
Cool. I love it. Other questions you all might have. I will say, since you aren't asking questions, I'll just tell you more things that we've talked about. As we look at the budget and as we look at all of these granting applications, one of the things we're aware of, and I'm aware very much as a priest in the diocese, someone who's been here 15 years, is over the past 10 years, we have shed a significant portion of membership and attendance. A lot of that was accelerated by the pandemic, but that's a reality. And so I know my own real goal for the Diocese of the Great Lakes is that we really tap in to the resources we have as a diocese to find ways to start turning the tide on that. And to do that in a variety of ways. So, for example, the one new grant we're hoping to roll out would be if you're a congregation that is right on the edge of affording a full-time priest but can't, but maybe if you had a little help that could step down over 5 years, you could call a full-time priest, and that would change the game for you by having that full-time presence. Or maybe you're a couple small congregations that want to yoke, but even yoked, you don't have what you need, but maybe if you had some help, you can. Or maybe you're a smaller congregation that, you can't even imagine having a full-time priest, but you have an amazing idea for local justice ministry and you just want to make it happen and need help. Then we would try to find ways to make that happen, because we really want to find ways to ensure the Episcopal Church is thriving appropriate to context in every county of our diocese as best as we're able. And I think we can do that together. I'm really hopeful about who we are as a diocese. Any other questions or comments? I'm never opposed to a Zoom meeting ending early, but I don't want to cut anyone off. All right. I guess I'll hand it back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jared. And thank you everyone for your questions. As Jared mentioned several times, this is not the end of when you can give feedback. You can reach out to him directly. Again, that was rector at SJEGH.org, St. John's Episcopal .com. Whew. Say it again, Jared, in its entirety.
Yeah, and actually .org also works. We bought both domains. It's rector at SJEGH, so that's just St. John's Episcopal Grand Haven.com.